as well. Okay, so before I dive into the presentation and start sharing my screen, there are a few things which I just want a feedback from any of you who would feel free to unmute yourself in case you're on mute. What do you understand? What is your understanding of probiotics or prebiotics? And I'm sure you've heard these words before because they're being so commonly used in our language and in the market and all. What is your understanding, if anybody would like to dive in, of what are probiotics or what are prebiotics? Anyone? And don't worry, you don't have to be right or wrong. It's not a test. You're not getting marked.
I think prebiotic is the food for the probiotic.
And what are probiotics? That's very right, Kathy.
Yes.
What are probiotics?
Yeah. And yeah.
Okay, so have all of you heard of antibiotics? I'm sure we are all aware that when you get an infection, you generally, especially if it's a bacterial infection, you take antibiotics. So the word antibiotic is basically antibiotic. Biotic is any form of life. In the context of supplements or medicines or prescription drugs, an antibiotic is something which is antibacterial life. So it's anti as in it stops or it kills bacterial growth or infections. So when you have a probiotic, which is the opposite of an antibiotic, it's basically something which stands for life or which supports life. So probiotic is nothing but a live bacteria or a live microorganism. So we're going to break that down further. And a prebiotic is before life can come into play. That's the food or the fiber or what these bacteria or microorganisms thrive on. So that is what basically in concept from a prebiotic and probiotic and antibiotic is. So those concepts, just keep that in mind before you, okay, I'm just going to mute everybody now because I'm going to start sharing my screen. Great. And so just keep that in mind before going into the presentation before. And I'm going to go through a few protocols as well during the presentation, which will come up once I start sharing my screen. So once you start seeing my screen, if one of you can just give me a thumbs up once you start seeing the screen, which I'm just bringing up in a minute. Okay, can you all see the screen? Great, great, great. All right, so we're going to be talking about probiotics, prebiotics, microbiome, and gut health, basically the interconnectedness between them. And it's a Zoom session, as all of you know. And the camera is optional in case during the presentation, if you want to switch off the camera, it's completely up to you. It doesn't matter. If you have any questions which come up when I'm giving the presentation, because it's a very small group today, you can either write in the chat box, which I will not get to during the presentation, but I will answer those questions towards the end of the presentation. Or you can just note down your questions. If you do not want to type in the chat box, just kind of write down the questions for yourself on a piece of paper or whatever, and I can get to them at the end of the presentation. Just in case during the presentation, if I come up with anything on a slide that is not clear, or if I say something which is not clear, please do not hesitate to unmute yourself and stop me and get the clarification. I mean, we are not 50 people here that I cannot answer. We are just 3 people attending today. So I should be able to answer any question in between and come back on track. Okay, so the agenda for today's presentation is basically going to be, I'm going to define and explain what is a microbiome, what are probiotics and prebiotics, and also where did it begin? Because we all talk about it, but we don't know how we really get these probiotics. What is the importance of a microbiome? What exactly is a microbiome? Once you understand that, you will understand what is the importance of a microbiome and what can you do to grow or support your microbiome through diet and lifestyle. and what are the sources of prebiotics and probiotics through food. That's primarily going to be what we will be discussing today. And then I will answer any questions and answers in the end. So what is a microbiome? So the word microbiome is made up of two words, micro and biome. So the word biome basically stands for an environment or an ecosystem where life can thrive. So when we talk about a microbiome, it's basically an ecosystem where microorganisms, which are primarily single-celled organisms, so then ecosystem where these microbes or single-celled organisms can survive, that is what is called a microbiome. Now, these microbes could be bacteria, they could be fungi or fungi, they could be yeasts, they could be viruses. Welcome, Darshana. You haven't missed. We've just started. So it's basically a colony or an environment or an ecosystem where these microbes can survive. That is what a microbiome is. For the purpose of our presentation today, we are going to kind of focus more on the human microbiome, because these bacteria, these viruses, these single-celled organisms exist everywhere. They're in your environment, they're in the air, they're in the water, they're in the plant, they're in the soil. But we are going to focus more on the human microbiome. So what's interesting to know, what we have learned is, and this research is very, very new. When I say very new, what we're talking about, the introduction of microbiome, is something which is, the research has come up only in the last 20 years, which is considered quite new as compared to when we're talking about researches which are available for the last 30, 40, 50 years. So the microbiome research is very new, and that concept has been there, but it's become mainstream media really big in practice for the last 5 to 7 years. So when we talk about the human microbiome, which is basically a colony of these single cell organisms, which are bacteria or viruses or fungi or yeasts and all, they exist on us. And the number of microbes that we have within the human body or on the human body is 10 times more than the number of cells that we have in the human body. So just to kind of put it in context, in a body, we have 30 trillion human cells. So multiplied by 10. And believe me, this number keeps changing. Some say 100 times more, some say 10 times more. I'm not going to go into the number game, but just remember that at least they are 10 times more. So I don't know how many zeros are there in 30 trillion. We have some financial people here who may be able to tell us how many zeros are there in 30 trillion. But add another zero, multiplied by 10, and that's the number of microbes that live on us. So the question that is generally asked is that, are we influenced by our own genes, which are there in each and every cell, or are we really influenced by the genes or the genetic makeup of these microbes? Because they are 10 times more in number than our body. Now, today science is saying that your genes in any kind of a health condition, any kind of your body's manifestation of certain things. When we talk about people who have diabetes and it runs in the family because it's a genetic disorder. Now, modern research is saying that actually genes play only a 5% role. 95%. So if you have a gene because it runs in your family that you may get diabetes or you may get heart condition or you have high cholesterol or things like that, you actually have the capability to turn off that gene even if you have it, by the role of epigenetics or over and above genes, which is your environment, your lifestyle, your diet, and the microbiome. All of them can actually trigger in supporting you to switch off that gene, even if you have a condition which exists in your genetic makeup. So there are people, like it's said sometimes, that stomach cancers, or there are families where every member of the family down the generation has suffered from cancer. So we are saying there actually, if you're aware of it, there are ways to turn off your their gene which is expressing, we can turn that off through the right kind of an approach. And that study is called epigenetics, and it's becoming really big. And so what we have seen is the highest concentration of these microbes or this colony of bacteria is found in your gut. Now, I'm going to clarify what is a gut, because it's so casual knowledge that today we talk about gut health. Your gut is actually anything along your complete digestive tract. So starting from your mouth and ending in your bum. So when you put your food inside, from there, so including when you chew, when you use saliva to chew your food, so complete GI tract, your gastrointestinal tract, till you poop out that food is your gut. And the maximum concentration of this bacteria is found in your gut and primarily in your large intestine. And so when you go and poop, or when you have a bowel movement, pretty much half your poop is microbes, which we are not even aware of. You're pooping out bacteria in the morning, and half of your poop is that. And so when you talk about a person who weighs around 50 kilograms or 60 kilograms or 135 pounds, the weight of your bacteria in your body is anywhere between 3 to 4 pounds. So anywhere between 1.5 to 2 kilograms is actually the weight of your gut bacteria. So that's how much they weigh. So next time when you weigh yourself, remember to eliminate the weight of your bacteria. It's not your real weight. Anyway, and something funny is that for the longest time, we thought that, when you pass wind or when you fart or when you um, feel gassy and things like that, and we used to think it's said that you should chew your foods and you should eat slowly because you take in air, and it's that air which creates wind. Whereas now there is definitely a little bit of swallowing of air which happens when we are eating food or when we are chewing, but actually most of the gas that is produced in the body is produced by the bacteria, and they produce primarily two kinds of gas, hydrogen and methane. And so when you fart, it's actually your bacteria who are producing gas. When they eat certain kinds of foods, they produce that gas, and that is what you release. So they play a huge role in your everyday existence. So these were just some kind of facts which people are not aware of, how important these microbes play a role in our health. So for the longest time, we used to think that a human body is basically made up of various organs. I mean, you have your food pipe, you have your mouth, and you have your lungs, and you have your heart, and you have your stomach and your liver and your intestines and your skeletal system and your muscular system. What we have found is that the whole body is covered with a colony of microbes. And so if you see in the slide, if a human body has 23,000 genes, which is each cell has a certain number of genes, your human body has 9 million genes of these microbes. So you see the difference in the number of genes that we can be impacted by because of this microbiome. And so a complete human being is actually a combination of our physiological anatomy, which is our organ system, plus this interaction of the human body with these microbes. And we are actually interdependent on each other, and we are incomplete without them. And so in today's times, what we are saying is that any research that does not consider the role of your microbiome is considered obsolete or incomplete. So any research which is being done today for the health of a human body or any health condition, like if, let's say, if they're studying cardiovascular conditions, or if they're studying heart conditions, or if they're studying cholesterol issues, or if they're studying digestive systems or anything, if they do not consider the role of the microbiome, that study is not considered a good study. It's not considered a study which has taken into factor all the parameters. So it's become that important that all studies have to consider the role of the microbiome. In fact, even there are a lot of studies today with COVID as well, where they're finding out that it's the presence of a diverse microbiome, the healthy colony of bacteria, which can prevent a person from getting COVID or not, or prevention of certain strains. And what they have seen is, now it's something which was not, they did not test before, but there is a very uh, like a very good detailed study which has come out very recently on COVID and microbiome, which talks about that people, they studied the microbiome of people after they had got COVID, and what they have seen is the certain strains of lactobacillus are missing in those people. Now, because they did not know these people were going to get COVID, their microbiomes were not checked before COVID, but they don't know whether it was COVID which caused them for the depletion of the microbiome, or was it because they didn't have those strains of bacteria, and that's the reason why they were more prone to getting COVID. So there's a lot of research which is happening in that field today as well. And they're also isolating certain strains of these bacteria and combining them with the COVID virus strain and seeing how it reacts to those strains. So there's a lot of research which is happening in the field of microbiome and understanding the COVID virus, the coronavirus. So what is interesting is that also a human body, what they have seen is it's not just the microbiome in the gut. Our human body has different areas which have different strains of bacteria and viruses present. So we have a skin microbiome, we have an oral microbiome, which is in the mouth, we have a lung microbiome, which is in the lungs. We also have a heart microbiome, which they're coming up with now. I haven't put it here. We have a gut microbiome, which is the complete gastrointestinal tract. And we have a urogenital microbiome. So for people, like when you're getting a lot of urinary infections or when you're getting a lot of yeast infections or candida infections, there could be that it's impacting the microbiome of that areas. And what they have found is there's certain strains of bacteria which they have found in these individual microbiomes, and it's not that the same bacteria are found all over the body. So they have found that in the mouth there is a particular bacteria which, if it is not present in enough amount, can actually lead to you getting more cavities. So there are ways to make sure that your microbiome in your mouth remains healthy. And if you use too much of alcohol-based mouthwashes, or if you use too much of fluoride-based toothpastes, or anything which is very high in chemicals, you're actually going to deplete the colony of healthy bacteria in your mouth. So they play a huge role. So there are a lot of ways where you can improve the areas or your mouth microbiome or your skin microbiome by minimizing the use of chemicals or anything which is very, very harsh for the skin. And all of them, all these bacteria and all these microbes need a certain acidic or a pH level. When your body goes away from that level, even if your mouth goes away from that certain pH level or your skin goes away from that pH level, these microbes can die and get destroyed, and chemicals also make an impact. So this was just kind of give you an idea of what is really a microbiome. So hopefully by now you would have understood what a microbiome is, especially a human microbiome. It's basically a colony of these bacteria and viruses and small single-celled organisms. Now, where does it all begin? So are you born with it? Are you always born with these microorganisms? How did you get them? So it's so interesting that there are two schools of thought. So one school of thought is that when a little baby is in the womb of a mother or in the uterus and the fetus is getting developed, one school of thought is that uh, the uterus is sterile, as in there is no bacteria or anything which can go inside the uterus. But what they have found is that the placenta, which feeds the fetus in the womb, is actually containing bacteria. So that has a microbiome of its own, the placenta. And these microbes, which have been found in the placenta, actually, uh, with the right kind of foods, they create certain chemicals which are called metabolites, and that through the placenta, the fetus is given those chemicals, and through that it thrives. That fetus's development of the brain and everything happens through that. So one school of thought is that, and the second school of thought is that there is a possibility that there is a microbiome which exists in the womb as well around the baby. So there's still research. I'm not going to get into that argument, but right now we can believe that the maximum colonization or the maximum seeding of a baby happens at the time of birth. So when a woman has a normal birth through the birth canal, that's the time when the baby gets completely covered with the amniotic fluid and passes through the birth canal, and that's when the baby gets completely seeded with these microbes. And that is the first 2 years of a child's development. Based on what is provided to that child decides what is going to be the microbiome of a child. Why is it important? The reason is because what they have seen today, that a child who has a normal birth, which is through the birth canal, and a child who has a C-section birth, today, if you go and get your microbiome tested, which is a poop test, they basically take your poop and they can check your microbiome. They are actually capable of telling you whether you had a normal birth or whether you had a C-section. The reason why they can tell you is because the strains of bacteria through both the births are completely different. And those strains of bacteria remain with you for the rest of your life. And so your full colony of microbiome, which is called your residential bacterial colony, develops in the first 2 years. And the primary strains are given to you at the time of birth. And that's the reason your mother's skin microbiome, her vaginal microbiome, the mode of birth, the gut microbiome, all that play a huge role in the development of a baby's microbiome. Now, and what we have seen is that no two people have exactly the same microbiome, as in the strains of the bacteria in their gut, no two people are same. So just to kind of, if any of you are interested in watching a movie, especially if you have family or if you have friends or if you're planning to have a baby soon, I would highly recommend watch a movie. It's called Microbirth. I'm going to play the trailer of the movie, and it'll give you an idea of where the research is going and what they're talking about. So take it with a pinch of salt. It's a movie, so they just kind of exaggerate as well. But it's a very, very informational movie on people who are planning to have babies, or any of your family, extended family who's planning to have a baby. So I'm going to play the trailer of that movie in the next slide, just to give you an idea.
We think we're at the pinnacle of our existence, and yet the reality is we've never been sicker. We have been facing a rising epidemic of plagues, from asthma to obesity to allergic diseases, and it's going to get worse.
Tomorrow's generation really is on the edge of the precipice.
We're bankrupting ourselves.
The cost would reach a staggering $47 trillion US.
That's not sustainable. We're hitting the wall right now. Let's say you have 10 diseases that are rising at the same time. Perhaps there's one thing that's fueling them all. Our ancient microbiome, which protected us against many diseases, is degrading.
We estimate we have lost about 1/3 of the diversity of our microbes.
If we miss the window at birth, then the immune system never matures correctly.
If you upset this process in the early life, then we may have consequences later.
And that can lead to production of disease later in life.
I think we're in the midst of the largest experiment in human history.
Humanity is heading for a huge health crisis.
The worst case scenario is, in fact, really terrible. So we have to alert the public.
I don't think we're too late, but we're definitely not too early either.
Turn the microscope on birth. It's a really important part of a human being's life.
We can make a significant impact on health for all mankind.
If how we're born affects our chances of long-term health, we need to seize this opportunity to actually turn the course of human health.
If we don't take the bigger perspective, how do we know that we're not altering the course of humanity?
So was it clear? Were you all able to watch and listen? Yeah? All right. Okay, great. So it's a movie which came out in 2015. It just kind of gives you an idea of what is going on and where the research is going. And it even tells you, again, I just gave you an example that today they're able to tell you whether you had a C-section or whether you had a natural birth. They can even tell you whether a child was breastfed or was given formula, because a mother's milk contains certain kind of bacteria. And not even only that, that bacterial milk which a mother's milk gives the child also promotes the growth of certain bacteria. The reason is the mother's milk contains certain prebiotics, which are certain kind of oligosaccharides, which a child cannot even digest. The baby's digestive system is not even developed to break down those kind of fibers which are present in mother's milk. So why is the mother's milk containing those oligosaccharides? Now research has found out that actually mother's milk contains those fibers to feed the bacteria which a baby has, which the baby has acquired at the time of birth. And those kind of fibers promote the growth of certain bacteria. So they can today even tell you through your microbiome whether you were breastfed or whether you were given formula. They can tell you whether you had a C-section or whether you had a natural birth. Again, this presentation is not about judging. There are reasons why sometimes women have to go through C-sections. There are times when you're not able to feed your baby. Does not mean that you have to kind of, there's something wrong that happened. So instead of feeling guilty, there are a lot of ways today that they're saying that given the right nutrition through the mother, or given the right kind of supplements, given the right kind of formula, you can actually, even after by the time baby is 1 year or 2 years old, in case they could not have a natural birth, you can still grow the diversity of the microbiome, but you just need to be aware of it. A lot of times people are not even aware of it. Today, if you go look at baby formulas, they say they contain prebiotics, and they're trying to match the prebiotics which are there in mother's milk. But again, they have a lot of other fillers and preservatives as well. So there are people who are so concerned that they've actually figured out how to make supplemental milk, or they've figured out how to make formula using natural ingredients. So all those options exist. You just need to be aware. And I mean, we spoke about that there is a reason why what you are born with actually can impact your long-term health. What kind of illnesses that you will manifest, or what kind of health conditions you will develop maybe at the age of 20 or 30 or 40, or you may be prone to, can actually be decided by the strains of bacteria which you receive at the time of birth, or you develop in the first 2 years. That is so crucial that it can play a role in the overall health of a human being in the long run. So just breaking it down, why do we care? Because today what we are seeing is that every chronic health condition is linked to the health of your microbiome. Okay, so I'm going to go back and tell you something which was very intriguing, which I learned last week. So why is it that what we are saying, research is saying, is that 70% of our immune system actually exists in our gut, which is along our complete digestive system. And the microbiome, or these bacteria which are present in our gut, are actually capable of priming or training our immune cells. So our immune system is basically made up of immune cells which fight our body's ability to, when it's exposed to infections, when it's exposed to viruses, any kind of, it produces inflammation. Basically, it's your body's immune system. It fights against any damage or any harm to the body. And these cells, and this work is done by soldiers which are present in the body. They're called immune cells, and there are different categories of immune cells. And those immune cells are actually trained, or they get primed or get their training from these microbes which are present in our gut. Why are these microbes responsible for training our immune system? The reason is that we as human beings have evolved on this planet only in the last few 100 million years ago, or not even that. Whereas these single-celled organisms have been on this planet for more than 4 billion years. And they learned the survival, and they learned how to derive energy and how to fight. And they were the first single-celled organisms which were using plants which were there on the planet, because plant kingdom came before animal kingdom came. And these microorganisms came even before the plant kingdom came. Amoeba was the first living single-celled organism which was found on the planet. So these microorganisms have evolved through time, and they have an inherent intelligence of differentiating between what is harmful and what is not. And the human being would not have evolved if it was not for the intelligence of these single-celled organisms. Because our mitochondria, which is in each and every cell of our body, is actually an ancient bacteria. I don't know how many of you remember the anatomy of a cell of a human body, because it's a biology class which you must have studied, or if you have children who you're going to teach, your sisters or brothers you're going to teach. If you go down the anatomy of a cell, it has a nucleus, it has mitochondria, it has cell membrane and cytoplasm and things like that. But the mitochondria, which is basically what converts food into energy in each and every cell, is nothing but has evolved from an ancient bacteria. So that's how human beings evolved and developed. So the intelligence for our existence comes from these microbes. That's how powerful they are at training our immune cells and immune system, which is what science is realizing now, that the human organs are not capable of doing anything if we do not rely on the intelligence of these microbiomes. That's why they prime or they modulate our immune system. And what has happened in the last 30, 40 years is that through the way our development of the world has happened, through the way we've exposed ourselves to chemicals, the pollution, the food becoming artificial, the pesticides and the preservatives and everything, that we have lost so many strains. They've become extinct. So many strains of these microbes in our gut, in our body, in our human microbiome, that we have lost almost 30 to 40% of the strains which used to be there with our grandfathers and our ancestors. And that's why they did not ever face the kind of lifestyle issues that we are facing. They used to face infections. They used to die because of infections, but they never died because of metabolic health conditions, which are basically lifestyle health conditions, cancers, heart conditions, cholesterol issues, autoimmune conditions. These were not what they were living with, because they had the microbiome, or they had the intelligence existing within them which could prevent that. What we have done is we have wiped out colonies of these microbes, so our immune systems are not getting, or our soldiers in our body are not getting trained to deal or to fight those, because we don't have anybody to give us those training anymore. And that's the reason why probiotics have become very famous again now. Or they're not really, I shouldn't be using the word famous, but why there is a need for using more probiotics and more prebiotics in our food, because we want to again start building our microbiome. We want to start again growing this diversity. We are hoping anything which has become extinct may come back into life if we start minimizing the exposure of chemicals, of toxins, and start eating the right kind of foods which can support our microbiome. So as I've said already, our immune system is primed by these microbes. They've evolved over billions of years. They carry the intelligence which our human beings are not capable of. And they impact the functioning of each and every organ system in our body. And something which is very, actually, it has really been very profound for me is that whatever happens on the planet Earth, the macrocosm or the macro level is what a human being experiences at a micro level. When we are talking about the diversity of our gut microbiome, we have lost the strains. On the planet also, the same thing is happening. Even in our soils where we grow food, the bacteria which used to be present, or these microbes which used to be present, which used to add nutrient load, which used to decompose, we have lost that even in the planet. Even on the planet, we have lost. There's certain species of animals which have become extinct. So what is happening on the planet is happening in us also as human beings. So we are just a reflection of what is going on around us. So it's a kind of a interdependent, correlated relationship, where if we start working on ourselves, or if we start working on the planet, we are bound to impact each other, because it affects, whether at the micro level or at the macro level, we will make a huge difference. And what's interesting is that these microbes, anything that you go through physically, mentally, and emotionally, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, we've seen it that people who are depressed or anxious, their microbiomes decrease in diversity. And what they have found is that your microbiome can change in hours. Like literally what you have in the morning suddenly can become more diverse in the evening. It's that easy to kind of change the microbiome by using the right kind of things and right activities. A simplest example which I can give you is, researchers, this is a Harvard research paper where what they studied was these scientists, especially they're microbiologists and who are just studying the microbiome. And it's a group of, I follow one of those researchers as somebody I study with, as in I do his courses. And so they were a group of 11 scientists who were researching, and for 1 month, they stayed in the forest. And they used to test their microbiome. These things are not available for us to do, as common labs are not doing it, but because these are researchers, they do it. So for a month, they stayed in the forest, and they would check their microbiome on a daily basis based on what they were doing in the forest. For 30 days, these 11 guys did not take a bath and stayed in the forest, exposed themselves to the wild, and their microbiome had, the diversity of their microbiome had increased by 30% after 30 days. So that's how powerful it can be when you live in the urban areas, urban climate, and when you constantly are exposed to cleaning and sanitizing and all, you actually can impact the microbiome. On a daily basis, they were checking the microbiome. Then another thing they found was they checked an athlete who goes in the morning, they check their microbiome in the morning, and then that athlete spend 4 hours exercising outdoors, and the athlete spent 4 hours exercising indoors. The microbiome of the athlete who had worked outdoors was more diverse and had grown by the evening as compared to an athlete who was working indoors. So even these things can make an impact on your microbiome. So, and they also found that the more you exercise, both of them, both the athletes saw an improvement in their microbiome, which means when you exercise, you improve. Your microbiome also thrives. Dopamine is produced, and there are microbes which are actually responsible for triggering the cells which produce dopamine. These microbes are also capable of producing serotonin, which makes you feel happy. There are strains of microbes which we have found out today that they produce serotonin in your gut. So there is so much which is going on, which is actually modulated and controlled by these microbes. So I'm just going to touch upon a few things, how gut health is dependent on our microbiome. They're responsible for the proper digestion and breakdown and absorption of your nutrients. They convert fiber. These microbes are actually who are eating the fiber, especially complex chains of fiber, and they convert them into important chemicals responsible. I'm not going to use the word, basically when they convert them into metabolites, which are butyrate and all. I've used them in these presentations before and people get confused. So just be aware that they produce certain byproducts when they eat fiber. And these byproducts are very, very important for healing inflammation in our gut lining. They heal inflammation in our brain. They heal inflammation all over the body. Remember, they're modulating your immune system. Your immune system is what creates inflammation in order to protect itself. But when it becomes chronic, when there is too much inflammation in the body, when you have swelling in the body, when your joints are hurting, all that can be brought down by certain products which are created, certain chemicals which are released by these bacteria. They produce transmitters. People have constipation, which is very common today. And there are various reasons why people have constipation. It could be lack of fiber. It could be lack of water. It could be lack of the right kind of foods. It could be a lot. But there is something called a signal, which is called dysautonomia, which is basically if your brain is not giving the signal to your body to do peristalsis or to create motility in your gut so that you can poop. That is something which is a problem with the functioning of the brain. And you will be surprised it is so common, because when you have inflammation in your gut, from your gut, the signal to your brain is sent through the vagus nerve about letting the brain know that you need to poop. When that system, that highway is blocked and that signal is not going to the brain is not going to trigger that. And generally that signaling becomes slower with age, but it's happening with a lot of people who are much younger. So that signaling is actually modulated by the microbiome. That neurotransmitter which sends the signal to the brain through the vagus nerve is actually created by these bacteria. So if you do not have enough diversity, that signal does not get created. That neurotransmitter is not produced. So, or it's produced, but it is weak. So that's why you have a sluggish digestive system where you can take much longer to poop or much longer to have a bowel movement. They fight infections and pathogens in food. Sometimes our food contains certain kind of infections, infectious bacteria, or certain things which are not suitable for us. So these bacteria can have the intelligence to decide this is not good for you and it needs to be eliminated. Today, they have even found out that people who cannot lose weight, especially because of certain metabolic conditions, they actually have an absence of certain strains of bacteria which have the capability of breaking down fats. So there are probiotics today with the strains which are missing with these people who are not being able to lose weight. Again, take it with a pinch of salt. I'm not talking about that you take probiotic supplements which help you lose weight just like that. It's a complete strategy which is needed, because obesity is always a side effect of a certain imbalance in the body, especially when you're doing the right things and you're still not being able to lose weight. There is something more which is going on. And it could be the lack of the presence of a strain which breaks down fats in the body rather than accumulating. So there are strains which are capable of doing it. And if you've got a compromised microbiome, you could have lost that strain. Also, very interesting. It also, today we take a lot of herbal supplements, like we take turmeric and we take some supplements which are plant extracts and all. So these microbes, again, have lived with the plant kingdom much before we evolved. So they understand the intelligence of these plant kingdom, these phytonutrients, and they actually know how to convert them into metabolites, which can be used by our body for use. If you do not have enough good strains, how do you convert these herbs and plants and these plant medicine into metabolites? You won't. So you could be eating so much of turmeric, and if it's not functioning because you do not have the strains, you're not getting the benefit of it to the extent where you should be getting it. So again, even to convert herbs or plant medicine into metabolites, you need the right kind of strains in your body. Okay, another connection, very important, is gut-brain connection. So we've always known that we used to say that I'm getting a gut feeling. And for the longest time, we used to say, oh no, it's not important and it's not true. But today they have proven that actually you have a second brain. When they say what is a second brain, it's basically the brain in your gut. And what they have found is that the same cells or the same nervous cells which are found in your brain are also found, the same cells are also found all along your gut lining, all along the lining of your digestive tract. And this is being called your second brain or your gut brain. And what we have seen is that this gut brain interacts with your brain up there, with your central nervous system, through a highway which is called the vagus nerve. And 80% of the signals are actually sent from the gut brain to the brain up there. So for the longest time, we used to talk about that the brain is the master organ, and it is what instructs the hypothalamus and everything which is present in the brain through the pituitary and produces hormones, and that is what instructs the rest of the body to function. But what we are seeing is actually that signaling for the brain to do all that function comes from the gut. So it's your gut which sends a signal through the vagus nerve for the brain to act the way. So 80% of the signals go upwards and only 20% of the signals come down. So your brain is not really the master organ, it is your gut, which is responsible for pushing it to become the controller. The bacteria in the gut we know today are capable of producing or stimulating the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. I have a full slide on psychobiotics, which I'm going to share after this one. They produce chemicals in your gut, which can fight inflammation. I've already covered that as well. And interestingly, they've also seen that if your body needs, it's very intuitive, if your body needs nutrients like B12, like vitamin K, like estrogen, it actually, your gut microbiome is capable of even producing these nutrients. But that's possible only if you have a healthy microbiome. So a lot of people who are vegetarians or who are eating plant-based are always concerned about getting enough B12. And what they have found is that a lot of cultures which primarily ate plant-based food had certain strains of bacteria which produced B12. So culturally, that area, that ecosystem was provided for them and they never had to supplement with B12. What has happened is, with the loss of 30% of the microbiome today, we may have lost the strains which were producing B12. So that's to that extent, when you're becoming more plant-based today, you may not even have the strains. And that's why we need to build the diversity of your gut microbiome. Something very simple as vitamin K. I don't know if any of you know what vitamin K is responsible for. So there are three kinds of vitamin Ks in the body. There is vitamin K1, K2, and K3. We're not going to go into the details, but remember vitamin K1, sometimes little babies, when they're born, they're given injections of vitamin K1 because vitamin K1 is responsible for clotting in your body. You know, when you get an injury, when you cut yourself, your body needs to have the ability, your blood has to clot so that you don't overbleed. That comes with the presence of vitamin K1. Vitamin K2 and vitamin K1 typically you will get from food sources. Vitamin K2 is not given to you from food. Vitamin K2 is produced by your gut bacteria. And what they have found is vitamin K2 is primal. It's very important for the transfer of electrons, or I would say, I won't use the technical words, it confuses a lot of people, but vitamin K2 is what is a signaling molecule, what is used by the gut bacteria to send the neurotransmitters to your brain and to each and every cell of the body. So when they need to carry these nutrients, what they have produced, they use vitamin K2 as a carrier. Now, each and every cell of your body has a vitamin D receptor. And most of us, we have issues with vitamin D absorption today. And that's the reason a good vitamin D supplement today comes with vitamin K2. The reason is because for that nutrient to get absorbed and reach each and every cell is done by vitamin K2, which your gut bacteria was capable of producing and carrying the vitamin D3 to each and every cell. That's what is happening. When your body makes that D3, or because of the sun, a lot of factors were responsible why we have lost our ability to get vitamin D3 from the sun, in spite of the fact that it's in abundance so many times and people didn't have deficiencies, is because we have again lost our microbiome, the bacteria which were capable of producing vitamin K2, which used to carry the vitamin D to each and every cell. We don't have that. So that is what is going on. There are multiple levels where we are affecting our health in the long run because of the loss of this bacterial species. Then estrogen. We women have the biggest issues with estrogen. We have so many hormonal imbalances. So what we have found is that within our gut microbiome, there is another colony of bacteria, which is called, that colony itself is called an estrobiome, which is again a microbiome, a colony of bacteria which produce or break down or metabolize estrogen in the body. And when we have lost the strains of those estrogen producing bacteria, or the bacteria which break down that estrogen, it is causing women to have breast cancer, uterine cancer. So it's so important to have those strains of bacteria which are capable of breaking down that estrogen in the body. And that's the kind of food which these bacteria need are cruciferous vegetables. So very, very important. That's why in all my recommendations for women, when I'm dealing with women clients, is I will always tell them to have at least 1 cup of green leafy vegetables and 1 cup of cruciferous vegetables, always cooked, not raw. Cruciferous vegetables should not be eaten raw. Because they make it much easier to digest when you kind of either saute them or steam them or cook them. So very important to have cruciferous vegetables. Immense benefits for women because of feeding the estrogen producing bacterial strains. Psychobiotics. So what is a psychobiotic? So that's where I was telling you earlier about antibiotic and prebiotic and probiotic. So psycho, the word stands for something to do with mental health. So psychobiotics are basically strains of bacteria which are capable of producing certain neurotransmitters which can impact your mood, your anxiety, your depression, your mental state. And so they are now researching strains of bacteria which are actually capable of producing serotonin or stimulating the production of dopamine. Now, we have dopa centers or dopamine receptors and centers in our brain. We have serotonin, which is produced in our gut and also produced in our brain. So all that can be impacted if the diversity of the gut microbiome has got affected. And what we have seen is there are certain, again, whatever I'm sharing today is research. What I'm sharing today may change 2 years down the line. It may change 5 years down the line because it's such a dynamic field, but there is so much which is coming out today on the health, but something which is what they're recommending and what we have always known is that you need to feed, in order to get the diversity of these microbes, you need to feed them fiber and you need to feed them diverse kind of fibers. So it's very important to eat diverse kind of vegetables and fruits in your diet because fibers come only from plant-based foods. And we will talk about the foods. I'm about to finish these slides. So the heavy part is going to be over and after this is going to be just easy slides related to food. So the certain kind of foods which are promoting the strains of bacteria which help improve your mood are FOS and GOS, which is fructooligosaccharides and galactooligosaccharides. So I don't want you to get stressed when you listen to those words. I am going to break them down for you. So when I say fructooligosaccharides, the word fructo is very easy to understand. It comes from fruits. And oligosaccharide. Now, if I break down oligosaccharide, so next time anywhere you hear the word oligosaccharide or galactosaccharide or anything, saccharide stands for sugar. Saccharine, I'm sure all of you have heard at some point of time, saccharide is basically a sugar. And all carbohydrates that you eat, get converted into sugar for energy, because our body primarily uses sugar for energy. Is that right? That's very clear. So now the fibers are also kind of carbohydrates. All fibers that you eat from plant-based foods are carbohydrates, but they're not simple sugars. The body, because they're such complex chains of sugars that our body does not have the ability to break them. The reason why we are eating these complex saccharides or oligosaccharides or galacto-oligosaccharides, they're basically very, very complex chains of sugars. The reason why we are eating them is because they're food for these bacteria. That's the reason why you need to eat them. So nature has been so nice and so abundant in taking care of everything that when you eat an apple, it actually provides the sugars and the pectins and everything that we need. And at the same time, it also provides the complex chains of these sugars for the bacteria. That's how nature has very intuitively put everything in whole foods. But if you eat an apple pie, or let's say a granola bar which contains some apples, and you expect it to do the same job that a whole apple is doing, you're not going to get it. You may get some other things, but anytime you're processing the food to a great extent, you are not going to get the benefits what nature wanted you to have. So that intuitiveness or that intelligence falls down multiple levels when you process a food. And nature has required you to process certain foods like grains, because you cannot eat raw grains because they're too complex for you to digest or to be able to eat. So that is where nature is allowing you to process the grains, as in rice and wheat and quinoa or anything, that you cook them and eat, and you will still get the fibers and the starches. Whatever you can break down, your body will break down. Whatever you cannot break down will be consumed. The fibers will be consumed by these bacteria. So what we've seen is FOS, which is fructooligosaccharides, and galacto-oligosaccharides are two kind of fibers which seem to be feeding the psychobiotic strains of bacteria. And I will give you the list of foods which contain that. They're nothing complicated, but just be aware that you should be including them in your food groups when you want. Also, there is a strain called Bifidobacterium longum 1714. Now, what is happening is there are thousands of species of bacteria which they have found, and they have found certain strains are missing in people who are depressed. So one of them is Bifidobacterium longum 1714. So you will find a lot of psychobiotics, or basically probiotics, which are focused on mental health, will contain this strain. And there are 2 or 3 more. Again, this presentation is not about giving you the names of bacteria and confusing you. It's more about what you can do overall. So there are certain supplements in the market which are made specially for depression, anxiety, and mood disorders. Again, remember, if you're just going to take pop-up pill as a supplement, it's a symptomatic approach that doesn't work with the body. The body needs a full shift in how you eat, how you think, what your lifestyle is. Remember, I had told you only 5% is genetics, 95% is your complete environment, your food, and everything. So again, if you're just going to pop a probiotic pill, but you're going to still keep eating your junk food or bad quality food or anything, it's not going to change, because that's not how. This is just to be used as a tool. A supplement is just to be used as a tool to support the complete shift in your lifestyle and your choice of foods and habits that you're going to build. Okay. So I think by now it must be pretty clear that probiotics are basically the beneficial bacteria that are needed to maintain a healthy microbiome. Now, again, I'm going to retract from the word beneficial, because, and I'm going to kind of just give you an analogy that right now research is showing that, okay, there is, let's say in your microbiome, 70% or 80% of the bacteria are good and 20% are bad, and they're kept in check because you have more good bacteria. So what, in fact, today researchers, especially microbiologists, are saying is the ones which we are considering bad, maybe 2 years down the line, we will think, oh, they're not really bad, they have a role to play. So it's just because we do not know what role they're playing in our microbiome, we are calling them bad. The only strains, so they are now shifting the word. They do not call these bacteria bad, they're calling them opportunistic. So when I say opportunistic, the analogy which I wanted to use was, as human beings, we as people have good feelings and sometimes we have bad feelings. When we talk about bad feelings, we can be angry, we can be jealous, we can be upset, we can be abusive. So as a human being, we have both of them which exists within us. So it's the same thing within our gut microbiome also, there is a balance of the good and the bad. Shouldn't say good and the bad. If the circumstances, what happens, if our conditioning, if the environment around us as a child, as we are growing up, if we are exposed to something in our family, or if we are exposed to something because of which we choose to go the wrong way, it is because of our environment. And those people can be brought back with the right kind of opportunities. So it's the same thing in our microbiome. If we provide the right kind of opportunities to these bacteria, those opportunistic ones will be doing the right things. But if we do not provide them the right environment, those opportunistic bacteria will be doing the wrong things. And that's the reason why we want to stay away from saying they're bad, because they may be playing a role. We just don't know what role they're playing because the research is still ongoing. So the easiest example which I can give you about making sure that the opportunistic bacteria do not go in the wrong direction is by you not consuming too much sugar, like synthetic, artificial sugar, drinking too much of Coke, eating too much of refined foods. Because what you're doing is basically creating or giving very easy source of food or the wrong kinds of foods to these bacteria, which have learned to grow as a source of energy. They have learned to use complex fiber chains. When you keep giving them sugar and do not give them fiber, in order to live or in order to thrive, these opportunistic bacteria start consuming that. And then they just make all other bacteria in your stomach lazy because they're getting these easy sources, and they stop producing what they're supposed to do, and they stop doing what they're supposed to do. So that's where we need to shift in changing the opportunistic bacteria towards the more bacteria which do the right things, or shift them towards the right attitude that we want them to behave towards. And again, prebiotics are basically the different kind of plant-based foods or fibers that these bacteria feed on. So that's the difference between probiotics and prebiotics. Now, now these bacteria are present in our air, in our water, in our soil, and everything around us. The more we urbanize, the more we clean, the more we sanitize, means the less diverse our microbiome is going to be. So what are the natural ways to increase diversity of your microbiome? What is it that you can do to increase the diversity of your microbiome? Walk in the forests, beaches, in nature. Spend as much time as possible walking outdoors because you will expose yourself to them. Swim in the rivers, lakes, oceans. Don't hesitate if you get an opportunity to put your feet in the lakes when it's the weather permits. Play with pets, even if they're not yours. Play with, animals of neighbors and things like that. Hopefully you're not scared. And if you can get a pet, there's nothing like getting a cat or a dog because they help in building your immunity. Garden, putting your fingers into the ground, into the soil. If you do not have access to the ground, go find a community garden. If you do not have access to that, even putting your hands into the pots on a regular basis in season builds your immunity. It supports the diversity of your microbiome. If you can go camping in the woods, countryside, nothing like it. In fact, if people who have circadian issues, as in they cannot sleep on time or they're having sleep issues, the best way is to sleep outdoors, because that's how you can reset your body's circadian rhythm and the melatonin production when you are in sync with the rise in the rise of sunrise and sunset and the rise of moon and all. Your complete body's clock can be reset if you can sleep outdoors in the right season at the right time. Or if you don't have access to it, at least draw your curtains in the morning. The minute the sun comes up or the minute you have light, make sure that light falls on your eyes because it can help reset your circadian rhythm. Open windows and doors, even in the cold season when it's winter, when you have your heating on, still even for 15 minutes, opening your doors and windows can get fresh air, can get an opportunity from the external microbiome to come in. And definitely, if you have the opportunity, exercise outdoors. I have made a habit and I've seen a huge difference now. I walk every day, even if it's pouring rain. I walk with my jacket and I walk my dog, and that's a habit which I do not give up now. And I have seen a huge difference. My whole day is miserable if I have missed a day when I haven't walked outdoors in the forest. So your body will kind of get so used to it and so adapted to it that you will start missing it. You will start yourself feel a difference in your body once you have got it used to being exposed to nature. So what are natural sources of probiotic foods? all kinds of fermented foods, even if they're not plant-based, will give you strains of bacteria. So there are people who are even fermenting things like prawns. And we have fermented milk-based products, which technically have no fiber in them because they're not plant-based. But like you can get probiotics even from non-plant-based food as far as they're fermented, because that means they have live strains of bacteria. Keep in mind that anytime when a food says it's fermented, it has to be refrigerated or at room temperature. If you're going to buy it off a store, it has to be refrigerated. If you're making it at home, you will be fermenting it room temperature or in a cold storage. Anything which has been pasteurized has lost its bacteria. So do not pick up a fermented food which has been pasteurized, because that means they have killed the bacteria. So you want to pick up something which is alive if you want to get probiotics. There's so many of them. Each culture has traditionally been kind of making fermented foods. They're very easily available nowadays. Even drinks, we have kombucha, which is fermented tea. We have beet kvass, we have sauerkraut, we have kimchi, we have yogurt, we have kefir, miso, tempeh. I mean, so many products which actually we use, which are fermented. You want to use more products which are fermented fresh rather than something which are bottled and kept for a long, long time, like soy sauce, which is also fermented. Those can be used as condiments, but not as main foods. So something like sauerkraut or kimchi can be used as main food. Again, you don't need too much, just a tablespoon, but start incorporating. If you're not using fermented foods, start incorporating them in your diet. And ideally, we recommend that you consume 3 different kind of fermented foods at least 5 times a week. That's like a maintenance dose, and ideally recommended. Interestingly, you also can get a lot of probiotics, which we are not talking about because the number of strains are very low. But anytime you eat raw fruits and vegetables, they all have colonies of microbes on them as well. So you get probiotics and you get prebiotics because they have the fiber as well. So, but the main sources are fermented foods for getting your probiotics, apart from your lifestyle habits, which you can get from your air and environment. Okay, supplements. So if you're interested in taking supplements as probiotics, there are a lot of options available in the market. And there is no end to the number of products. I can tell you 90% of them do not work. The reason is because a lot of them do not make it past your stomach acid, because there is a certain pH level which is needed for these bacteria to survive. So the companies are doing research, and that's why, if you've heard of it, they say CFUs, which is colony farming units, which is basically you're looking for something at least 10 to 15 billion CFUs, because after consuming 10 to 15 CFUs as a maintenance dose, maybe what reaches your large intestine or your the area where they need to thrive, maybe just 1 or 2 billion. And 1 or 2 billion is nothing when we talk about the number of microbes that are needed to make a difference. So when I'm working with a client, if I see a big reason to give them microbiome probiotic supplement for a specific reason, we will go even up to 50 billion or 100 billion. There are really high, when people have IBS issues like Crohn's and colitis and things like that, there are specific products which are very, very high in colony farming units. Ideally, what you're looking for is human strain. If you're not sure, there are products now, they say they are shelf stable, because generally probiotics are active, they're alive, and they needed to be refrigerated. But now a lot of companies are making products which are shelf stable. Again, there will be times not every product works for everyone, because you don't know what your microbiome is like, and you don't know what strains are missing in you and what strains you need introduced. So you may have to try a few to see what works for you. So interestingly, there is a lot of people for whom probiotics do not work. There is another source of getting probiotics into you, which is called spore-based probiotics. So a spore is basically, think of it as an egg, which gets converted into a bacteria. So the spores can actually make past the stomach acid. So in the market, there are spore-based probiotics as well for some people whose acidity or the stomach acid or the stomach pH level is not allowing probiotics to reach where it needs to. Sometimes they do much better with spore-based probiotics. So again, you will know once you start taking them. And a lot of probiotics come with prebiotics, as in they come with the food for those probiotics. So they have something called FOS or GOS, which are basically oligosaccharides or prebiotics or fibers, which these bacteria specifically have been researched that they thrive on. If you have too much of stomach issues, you may not be initially able to take probiotics which have prebiotics added to them. And so you may need a supplement which does not have prebiotics in it. So it's something which is very individual. I work with clients and see what works. But some of the common brands which are available, I personally work with a few brands, but you'll have to go and see which one works for you. As a maintenance dose, if you want to take probiotics, always look for a broad spectrum probiotic, which means a broad spectrum is that it should have at least 7 to 8 strains. The more, the better, because that means you're getting exposure to a diversity of strains. And ideally, a maintenance dose should be at least 10 to 15 billion CFU minimum. Do not take a probiotic less than that. Probiotics can be easily given to children as well. There are probiotics which are there even for infant, for babies. And there are ways, when I told you that if a baby has been born with a C-section because of whatever reason, probiotics are just bacterial. And we know what strains, like lactic acid producing bacteria, which strains are very easy. The easiest way to bathe a newborn baby is just bathe them with yogurt and bathe them with kefir, and you're actually going to introduce them to probiotics. So there's so many ways which a newborn baby can also be exposed to probiotics, so they're very safe. Again, there are products in the market as well which you can give to new infants or infant babies, which will tell you they're for 6 months plus, or they're for newborns, or they're for 3 months plus, or 1 year, in case you feel a baby could not be born with normal delivery, or a mother is not being able to feed. So there are other ways to build the microbiome of a baby as well. Okay, prebiotic foods. Pretty much there's 16 different kind of fibers which have been studied, which can be divided between 2 categories, soluble and insoluble fiber. Don't worry about the 16 kinds. You don't need to know the names, oligosaccharides, this, that. Don't worry about it. That's for a person like me who likes to research and study. But what you need to know is that all those categories can be divided into these food groups, which are considered to be very, very important. Fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans and lentils, mushrooms, starchy and root vegetables. One category which I missed here is cruciferous vegetables, nuts and seeds, and hydrocolloids. Now, don't worry about hydrocolloids. All of us do get it through the preserved foods that we use in today's times, because they're using it so commonly. Now, hydrocolloids, the easiest example I'll give you is xanthan gum or psyllium or agar-agar. These are basically used as thickening agents in gluten-free products and gluten-free flours and all. So these are needed. Sometimes they can be irritable. They can cause irritation to your gut as well, but in small quantities, they do feed certain strains of your gut microbiome. So like some people who have constipation take psyllium husk. So that's enough. That's the kind of fiber which will feed. It's a gum. It comes under the category of hydrocolloids. So that's why that is a category you don't need to worry about unless you're really having major constipation and you need to study with a practitioner to see if those can help. But apart from that, as far as you're using whole foods on a regular basis, on a daily basis, make sure all those food categories are covered, at least, if not daily, every alternate day. Like we use mushrooms a lot in our food, and we make sure, because mushrooms are one of the highest sources of fiber and certain medicinal properties. Again, I don't want to use complicated names and overwhelm you, but they have certain kind of beta glucans, they have certain kind of fibers, which are very, very important. In fact, there are certain medicinal mushrooms which are called immunomodulating. That means they can even modulate your immune system because of certain properties which are present in them. If hopefully in the next year, I will be giving a presentation again. I have done the mighty mushrooms or the medicinal mushrooms. I will be doing it because I keep doing it every 3 to 4 months. So in case any of you have not joined or are interested, I can share that with you. So at least, again, 5 to 7 servings with all food groups included on a daily basis. And then if you are aware of any food sensitivities or allergies, you just have to make sure you follow that. So these are some categories of different kinds of fibers. Again, don't worry about the names, but there are certain ones which I have highlighted in red. Those carry a lot of research papers. And that's the reason I highlighted them. But does not mean that the other fruits and vegetables will not give you the fibers which can feed your microbiome. It's just certain vegetables and fruits have got a lot of research available on them. So the major ones are Jerusalem artichokes, chicory, garlic, onions, dandelion greens, asparagus, bananas, especially green bananas and plantains. They have a lot of research on being very high in prebiotics. Again, I did not highlight, but all cruciferous vegetables, especially broccoli and broccoli sprouts, are considered, Brussels sprouts are considered to be really, really beneficial for the estrobilome. All cruciferous vegetables are very good for the estrogen producing in bacteria. GOS, which is galacto-oligosaccharides, are all there in beans and lentils and legumes. So resistant starch is a kind of fiber which when you consume, it does not spike your blood sugar. But otherwise, if you consume them regularly, they will spike your blood sugar. But there is a certain way of preparing certain of these foods which actually do not spike your blood sugars and become food for the bacteria. The most common examples are cooked and cooled rice. So when you cook the rice and you cool it down, it becomes a resistant starch. And when you consume that, it can actually feed your microbiome, the bacteria. Similarly, boiled potatoes. When you boil the potatoes and cool them down and then make mashed potatoes out of it, or we do stuffings with potatoes and things like that, they again become a resistant starch. Green bananas and plantains, very high of sources of resistant starch on its own. Oats and mushrooms, both of them have beta-glucans, which is a kind of fiber. And again, raffinose, oligosaccharides. Again, as I said, don't worry about the complicated words. IMO stands for isomalto-oligosaccharides. Malt comes from grains, the sugar in the grains. So there are actually fibers which you can get from grains, potatoes. Even honey contains certain oligosaccharides which are suitable for the bacteria in your body. So honey is a better sweetener. Maple syrup is a better sweetener because it contains certain strains or certain chains of oligosaccharides which come under the category of IMOs. Even fermented soy like natto and tempeh are very good sources of isomalto-oligosaccharides. So it's like, if you've not heard of some foods, try and introduce them. At least try them out to see if you would like to make a part of your diet. But the key is that try and consume as much as possible of whole foods rather than processed foods and refined foods. Okay, what is impacting our microbiome that you can minimize to make sure that you do not lose diversity or do not affect your microbiome? Avoid the use of antibiotics as much as possible. When it's needed, it's needed. And a lot of times, so this is an argument which I have, not an argument really, but this is a discussion which I do with a lot of my clients. And sometimes because of certain infections, you're in a course of antibiotics. The doctors will tell you not to take probiotics with antibiotics when you're taking, because they will say that you will lose the effect of the antibiotic. But there is another school of thought which is allowing you actually now that you take the probiotic and you take the antibiotic, you just take them at a difference of at least 6 hours. Do not take them together. But it can actually prevent the growth of yeasts which are produced when you start taking antibiotics, because the antibiotics do not kill the yeasts. So they can overgrow and create yeast overgrowths, candida overgrowths, in case you're taking antibiotics without probiotics in your diet or without probiotic supplements. So they should be taken, but at a gap. Synthetic and artificial sweeteners, any diet cokes and zero cokes and zero diet drinks, all of them contain these artificial sweeteners. Please avoid them. Stress and insomnia, very important, because your microbiome gets affected by stress and insomnia in a big way. Processed foods, chemicals, and preservatives, avoid as much as possible. Overusage of cleanliness products and sanitizing. Chlorine in drinking water. So the city of BC or anywhere you are, they have to add chlorine to the water. Try and filter your water so that you can, or use even a basic filter which can filter the chlorine. And if you cannot get a filter, fill your water and leave it open for a couple of hours. Fill it at night and leave it open, because the chlorine will dissipate in the environment. And then the water that you drink after a couple of hours will be chlorine free. Smoking and alcohol, I don't even need to go in that direction. Now, there are certain alcohol which are considered sources of probiotics, like fermented wine and beer and all. And all alcohol is produced from the process of fermentation. overconsumption is what causes issues, especially if you have an existing health condition. But once in a while, it's completely fine. You need to know the balance that is needed with alcohol consumption. And of course, EMFs, radiation from cell phone services, all of them impact our gut microbiome. So this is the end of the presentation. It's basically the takeaway is that diversity is the key to a good, healthy microbiome. The more you expose yourself to either diverse kind of fruits and vegetables or habits that you form to build the diversity, and very important to get connected to nature. And because we have to understand that we are living in interdependence and codependence with the nature, and we coexist. Once we understand that and the fact that we are a microcosm of what is happening on the planet, once we are connected to that understanding, to that feeling, to that gratitude of what the planet is doing for us and what the Mother Earth is doing for us and what it's expecting from us, that understanding deepens, and it does affect your overall long health and your symbiotic relationship that you have with the planet as well and the ecosystem. So that's the end of my presentation. I mean, all of you have information about me, so you don't really need this. But generally, these presentations, for those of you who are joining me for the first time, the next presentation is going to be on inflammation and nutrition, because inflammation is something which is linked to each and every chronic health condition of today. You can have inflammation in your knees, you can have inflammation in your heart. And in fact, when you have depression or anxiety or stress, you have inflammation in your brain. You do not know it, you do not feel it, because we do not have sensory nerves in our brain. When you have a headache, that's different, that's a vascular system. But within the brain, you do not have sensory nerves where you will feel the inflammation in the brain. So that's your body's way of saying something is wrong. Inflammation is produced by your immune system. So we're going to break down inflammation and talk about what goes on in the body and how to kind of support the body in fighting inflammation and your overall health with nutrition. So technically there is no session in December, but there are a lot of requests which are coming for building immunity, especially in the times of COVID. So if I'm going to do a session, if I'm able to manage doing a session, I will send out an email just like today. All of you have been added to the list. If I'm doing a session on building immunity, you will know in December, otherwise I'll do it in the next year. And some of the topics which are going to be in the next year are insomnia and stress, because a lot of people are having stress and sleep issues. So that's a request which has come as well. And those dates will be sent out. And another one which again has been brought up is because I know a lot of people, I have a few clients who have PCOS and hormonal issues and experience hormonal imbalances. So that's another topic which I will be discussing in the bringing up in the new year. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to open it for any questions that any of you may have. Please, okay, Alice, I got your message. Please have a session in December. Thank you for sharing that. I will try my best.
I've got a question about when we take tinctures.
Yes.
It seems like alcoholic.
Yes.
It's like very strong. How do you protect your mouth after you take it? Because I take it.
Are you taking your tincture just neat, or are you putting it in the water and taking it?
No, at night I put one in the water, but during the day I just take it neat.
Okay, so putting it in the water just makes it a little bit easier on the mouth if you're concerned about changing the microbiome. But remember, a tincture is the intelligence of that plant extract. It comes with the ability to protect your mouth microbiome. It has the intelligence where it will not kill the microbiome. So don't worry too much about it.
Okay, great to know.
It's the alcohol which comes without, or mouthwash which has got chemicals added into it. That is what we are concerned about.
Hello?
Yes, Mara.
Okay, I was told that as we get older that we need to partially steam our vegetables to help with digestion. Can you speak to that?
Yes, it is very right that as you get old, your digestive system with age slows down, and it'll become difficult for you to break down the fibers and digest food. That's just nature's way. And so definitely cooked foods are much easier to digest and break down if your digestive system has slowed down, because basically what you're doing is you're breaking down the fibers, you're breaking down When you cook, you're breaking down the foods, the macronutrients and the micronutrients to be easily absorbed. So for sure, if you're a senior or if you're on the if you're older, cooked foods are definitely better. Also, sometimes even with younger people who have really poor digestive systems, who are experiencing a lot of IBS, we tell them to avoid raw foods till we can bring their stomachs back on track. So it's not just for older people, it's also for younger people, which has become very common that they have digestive issues.
Is there also a problem in regards to eating rice other than it maybe being organic because of its being a high gluten content?
Rice does not have gluten unless there is a cross-contamination. The grains which contain gluten are wheat, which is a certain kind of gluten. The other grains which have gluten are barley, rye, and triacle, or if I'm getting it right. But a lot of people have issues with the gluten in wheat because of the fact that it's been genetically modified, the grasses, or even if it's not been modified, if it's not the GMO variety, it's been hybridized. And the gluten content of the wheat that we're eating today is 10 times more than what our forefathers were eating. So first of all, our bodies are not used to breaking down gluten, which is 10 times more than what we really need. And plus the glyphosate or the chemicals which are being used in the gluten are creating issues with our digestive system. So if you're trying to avoid gluten, rice is not the issue. The problem with rice is there is a high amount of arsenic, which is found in rice plantations around the world. So the problem with rice comes with the chemicals, with the pesticides and the arsenic, which is coming from the ground because of.
So therefore we have to search out an organic white rice.
Yeah, and also we've seen, I mean, this was a 2016 or a 2018 study on the level of arsenic in rice, and what they found is if you can get an organic basmati rice from the Himalayan region, they found the lowest amount of arsenic in that belt.
So where can we get proper rice?
You can get a lot
in
of
our
sources
area
of organic rice. I said basmati, which is the rice which comes. So if you can find something which comes from the Himalayan zone, there is, Mara, I can send you, maybe just let me write it down in the chat box. There is, if you look for basmati rice, and if you look for this particular Dehraduni basmati rice, Dehradun is a region in the Himalayas, and there is a rice growing belt. And there are times when I look for this variety of basmati rice, and I don't know if you'll find organic or not, but if you can get the Dehraduni basmati rice, it seems to have lower levels of arsenic.
Okay, and I was curious about cooking the white rice and then eating it cooled. Why was that again?
So white rice, whether white or brown, when you cook it and you cool it down, it becomes a resistant starch. So as a resistant starch, first of all, they have found that it does not spike the blood sugar to that level as regular white rice would. It slows it down, but it's not that it's not going to spike it at all, but it slows it down. And the other thing is it becomes a food, this chain of starch becomes more resistant, which means it becomes a little bit more complex, and it becomes food for the bacteria as well.
Yeah, I heard that in some countries they cook up rice and spoon the liquid from the rice for those the elderly who are quite feeble.
Yeah,
and that's what they feed. People.
Yeah, because it's a very easy form of diet or food, which is very easily absorbed. And that's why even in cultures, the first grain that we introduce to a child is like rice or rice water. The reason is because it's very easily absorbed. It's a clean starch, which the body can break down and can be used as a source of energy right away.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
So Kefir is pretty famous right now. I just wondering, is there any non-dairy curfew?
Are you talking about kefir?
Kefir, yeah, kefir.
Yes, you will find non-dairy kefir as well. You will find a coconut-based kefir. It's not easily available, but it is there available off the shelves. If you want to make kefir on your own, you can make kefir using coconut milk as well, using the same grains. I will share a resource. It's called Cultures for Health. If you go on their website, they have given the recipes for how to make coconut kefir using regular kefir grains. Okay, so I'll just write it down. Cultures for Health. So just Google this website. And they have a lot of recipes of if you plan to do fermented foods at home, or if you want to make coconut kefir at home. So it's basically you do use it for making coconut kefir, but every after 3 or 4 times, you have to soak your grains in regular whole milk so that they can get the food from there as well. Or sometimes just to the coconut milk, you can add a little bit of honey or some kind of sugar source so that the grains can get their food, because basically what they're eating is sugars. From the milk, they get lactose.
Okay.
All right. Any other question? Okay, if there are no other questions, then thank you very much everyone for attending, and we will call it a day. And happy Thanksgiving to all of you in Canada. And Alice, I know you're in India, but I'm surprised you're attending from India. You attended in the morning, and the questions which were asked in the morning didn't get repeated at this time, so it's a little different. And I know you had to leave early, but you didn't miss much. But is there something specific that you had asked and didn't get answered in the morning session?
No. Hi, I did ask a question, but I don't remember now what I asked. so maybe when I remember, I will.
You can just text me and I will answer that question for you.
I'll do that. But Geeta, I mean, if you could do something about making these recordings available, because there's just so much that you pack into this time that it becomes very difficult to retain everything. And even writing, it's, I can't write fast enough. So, I'd love, I mean, not that I would want to share it with anybody, but just so that I could kind of consolidate on my notes, I'd really be grateful if there was something like that.
The thing is,
available.
last time I completely forgot to record, but today I remembered to record. So this session has been recorded. It's just, I am not getting the time. I wanted to create a YouTube channel where I would have uploaded these recordings. It's going to happen. I'm just collecting them, and I will share the links for these recordings.
Sorry, Geeta, I lost you for a bit because the electricity dropped. Could you just repeat what you said?
Yeah. So Alice, the last session, I forgot to record. So we don't have access to the last session. But today's session, now morning session, again, I forgot to record. But this one, I put a note on my laptop that I won't be able to see the screen if I don't record. So I had a sticky note here saying recording and had put it in front so that I remembered to record. So I recorded this session and I will upload them on YouTube. I have a channel. It's just I haven't found the time because I have to create this file, convert it, and then upload it on YouTube. So the first gut health is there. And I'm just going to, the first session on gut health has been recorded. This session today's has got recorded. So these 2 sessions have been recorded and I will try and upload them so you'll have access to it. Otherwise, keep coming again and again. And
I think I'll just keep showing up to like consolidate all my notes, so I'll have them coming out of my ears at the end of it, but I'm okay with that.
But it's so interesting because the morning session goes in a different direction and the evening session goes in a different direction because it's such a diverse exposure that the knowledge which people come with is so different that I get different questions. And so the information goes in 2 different directions. So actually the question and answer session should be recorded. And also sometimes when I'm talking, when I'm sharing something, what comes to my mind, I share. So I know in the morning I had shared a little bit different stuff and now I've shared a little bit different stuff. So it just happens, it goes with the flow.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Anyway,
Anyways, but thank you for all your, and I really must appreciate you for the way in which you're able to simplify all of this, because I'm sure this is a lot of technical stuff. But thank you. You just simplify it and make it so much more easy for all of us.
thank you. Thank you everyone for joining, and I think we'll call it a day. And
Okay.
hopefully I will see you all next month. And if you have any questions, you know where to reach me for any questions or clarifications. And if you know of anyone as well who may be interested in a nutritional consult or can benefit, reach out as well. Thank you. And in fact, Alice, I wanted to mention to you, if you have any groups you're familiar with,
I have been kind of posting it, but somehow I think they're just not able to make it, because right now the Zoom culture is so much that people are literally, so like, I had to hop out of yours into another one because I had to share something there. I mean, I would have not wanted to miss it. I could have given it a miss if I was not sharing.
that's okay. Don't worry about
So,
that. What I'm saying is I'm doing
so
this
I
for
think
small
people have,
church groups as well. I have a networking group and I did that for the networking group. So even if you have a book club, a small group or a church group or anything, if they need, because I do these complementary. For me, this is a part of, like, I have a purpose in life, and I mean, apart from the business aspect, which I don't worry about because the money just comes from wherever. I'm not too concerned about that. But there is another aspect which for my own satisfaction, I need to share this and make this people aware that which direction they need to go. If we want that shift in the planet, this knowledge has to be shared. So that's the reason, if you know of groups who can benefit, I'll be more than happy to help there as well.
Yeah, I'll work on it. Let me see if I can just get a group together,
I
because
mean, no
I really
pressure or
feel people
anything,
need.
just if you.
No, I understand that. I've been trying to do this, but maybe not as a group of, let's say a bunch of people that are already part of a group. It might be easier to, because I've been sending it to specific individuals.
Yeah, because there are book clubs. I did do it for, I think last year I'd done it for a book club. Then I did it for a Facebook platform. It was just a platform of women. And that's how my initial presentations were done 1.5 years ago when COVID had just started. And so we had made it like a wellness Wednesday, and every Wednesday on that Facebook group, I was doing a presentation, and that's how I started giving them. And but now I'm taking it to the next level. I'm adding a lot more information than those.
Right. I'll do that. Geeta, if you could just send me a list of the topics that you do these sessions on, then that would also help. So I could share it, and then, whichever topic most of the people want, then I could look at working from that perspective.
Yeah, that is possible. Also, if there's anything specific they want to learn, I can even create a program, as in I can create a presentation. So
if you
I will
could give
send you.
examples, if you could give examples of what you don't already have, but you could create, that would also help. So it would just.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll do that. I'll send that
Thank
to you,
you.
Alice. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining. We'll call it a day. Once again, happy Thanksgiving to the Canadians here. And,
yes, wish all the same.
And thank you. And we will hopefully see you again next month. All right. Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.